The morning started in a very ordinary way. I was standing at the kitchen counter, rinsing out a coffee mug, listening to the dishwasher hum in the background. It was Tuesday. My husband had already left for work. My daughter, Emma, was upstairs getting ready for school. The house felt steady, predictable. Then my phone rang. It was the bank manager. His voice was careful. Too careful. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "there's been a full transfer from your daughter's college account." I turned off the faucet. The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. "What kind of transfer?" I asked. "A complete withdrawal. Authorized yesterday." For a moment, I thought there had to be some mistake. That account had been building for almost 14 years. Birthday checks, extra work projects, tax refunds, every extra dollar we could manage. I drove to the branch within 20 minutes. Emma sat beside me in the small office with her backpack still on her shoulders. She hadn't said much in the car, just watched me. The manager slid a printed statement across the desk. The balance read 0, clean, final. I kept my voice steady. "Who authorized it?" He hesitated, then turned the paper slightly toward me. The name on the transaction was my sister's, Diana Caldwell. Emma's fingers tightened around mine. I could feel the question in her grip, even before she spoke. "Mom, does that mean I can't go to Ridgeview anymore?" Ridgeview University had been her dream since she was 10. I inhaled slowly. "We don't know that yet." Outside, traffic moved as usual. People walked past the bank windows with coffee cups and headphones. Nothing about the world looked different, but something had shifted. And that afternoon, when I pulled into my driveway, there was already a certified letter waiting in my mailbox. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the kitchen table, and I waited. The next morning, I drove across town to the river district where Diana lived. She had always liked high places, glass walls, clean lines, views that made everything below look small. The concierge recognized me. He gave a polite nod, then made a quiet call before letting me into the elevator. When the doors opened, the scent of something floral and expensive drifted through the air. Soft lighting, white marble floors, the kind that echo under your steps. Diana was standing near the windows, holding a slim champagne glass, even though it wasn't noon yet. She turned slowly, smiled like we were meeting for lunch. "Claire," she said, "you should have called." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "You emptied Emma's college account." Her smile stayed in place. Only her eyes shifted. "I moved the funds," she corrected. "It's temporary. You're too cautious with money." "It wasn't yours." She walked past me toward the kitchen island, heels clicking softly. "Family resources are fluid. You know that." I noticed a new painting on the wall. Large, abstract, probably expensive. "I'll return it," she said lightly. "When it makes sense." There was something rehearsed about her tone. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked around the room, the furniture, the art, the view. Then I said, "You'll be hearing from me." She gave a small laugh. "Claire, don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. I left. At home, Emma was sitting at the dining table with her laptop open, earbuds in, fingers moving quickly. She looked up when I walked in. "She's not giving it back," I said. Emma nodded once, like she had expected that. Then she closed her laptop and turned it toward me. "I think I know how she got into the account." I felt something shift again. Not panic. Focus. "What do you mean?" "She used Grandpa's old joint login," Emma said. "The one you never changed after he passed. The security questions were easy. I've seen her snooping in your office before." I stared at her. She didn't look upset. She looked analytical. "If she accessed it that way," Emma continued, "that's unauthorized. The bank has to treat it as fraud." There was no anger in her voice, just structure. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Show me. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock above the stove, and for the first time since the bank call, I felt something steady return. Then I waited for her to begin. Emma adjusted the laptop between us and pulled up the account history. The screen glow reflected faintly in the kitchen window. Outside, it was already dark. The porch light cast a soft yellow circle onto the driveway. She moved through the bank portal with steady hands. "See this?" she said quietly. She pointed to a login record from 2 days earlier. The location wasn't ours. Different IP address, different device. "She didn't even try to hide it," Emma added. I leaned closer. The cursor hovered over a series of timestamps. Late evening. Just after 9 p.m., Diana knew our routines. She would have known I was at my book club that night. She would have known Emma would be upstairs finishing homework. She would have known I wouldn't be checking email alerts. That part settled heavily. "Pull the transfer details," I said. Emma clicked into the transaction. A full wire transfer. No installment, no partial withdrawal. Every dollar moved at once. Destination, Diana Caldwell. Personal account, no trust, no business name, just her. The simplicity of it told me something. She believed we wouldn't look closely. Or maybe she believed we wouldn't challenge her at all. Emma began taking screenshots. "Let's document everything," she said. "Dates, times, device history." I watched her work. Calm, methodical. I realized I had underestimated how much she had absorbed over the years. She'd sat at the kitchen table while I balanced budgets. She'd listened to conversations about interest rates and savings plans. She understood structure. By midnight, we had a folder saved to my desktop. Account logs, transfer confirmations, IP access points. Emma leaned back in her chair. "Step 1, she said softly, almost to herself. "Prove access was unauthorized." I nodded. She was already thinking in systems. The next morning, I returned to the bank alone. The lobby smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee. The same manager met me in his office. He closed the door. I placed a neat stack of printed documents on his desk. "These are login records," I said. Access came from a device not registered to our household. The account was accessed using outdated joint credentials that were never reauthorized after my father's death. He scanned the pages slowly. His expression shifted from polite concern to something more procedural. "We'll need to escalate this to fraud review," he said. "If credentials were used without permission, this changes the classification." "That's what I'm asking you to do." He nodded. "There may be a temporary freeze while we investigate." "That's fine." He paused. "The account the funds were transferred to will also be flagged." I held his gaze. "Good." He began typing into his system, filing, not reacting, processing, and that was exactly what I wanted. No emotion, just procedure. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. Diana. I let it ring once more before answering. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping any greeting. I set a towel down carefully. "I requested a fraud review." "My account is frozen," she snapped. "Do you understand how humiliating that is?" "I understand that you accessed an account without authorization." "It was family money," she said quickly. "You're overreacting." I didn't raise my voice. The bank doesn't define family as authorization. There was a long silence on her end. Then she lowered her tone. "You're making this messy." "It already was." She exhaled sharply. "You always did think in black and white." "I think in documentation." She hung up. I put the phone face down on the counter. Then I finished folding the laundry. Over the next week, small shifts began happening. Diana stopped posting photos online. A mutual friend mentioned casually that she had postponed a renovation project. Then Emma came home from school one afternoon with a tight expression. "She was there," she said. "Who?" "Aunt Diana. outside the front entrance. I felt something inside me grow very still. What did she say? She said there were misunderstandings, that adults sometimes fight over money and kids don't need to worry. And? I went back inside and told the office. They walked me out through the staff exit. I nodded once. That was the line. Money was one issue. Approaching my child without speaking to me first was another. That evening, I called an attorney, not to file a lawsuit, just to understand the boundaries. The office was quiet when I went in the next morning. Dark wood desk, soft overhead lighting. The attorney listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "We can issue a formal notice of no contact. Given the financial dispute and her visit to your daughter's school, a restraining order would not be unreasonable." "I don't want drama," I said. "You're not creating drama," he replied. "You're establishing limits." That word stayed with me. Limits. When I returned home, Emma was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with a notebook open. "What are you working on?" I asked. She turned the notebook toward me. It was a floor plan sketch. Diana's penthouse. "You never know what information becomes useful," she said. I studied the drawing quietly. My daughter wasn't reacting emotionally. She was adapting. And I realized something then. This wasn't about winning. It was about restoring order. That night, after Emma went upstairs, I opened my laptop again. There was something about the transfer pattern that hadn't sat right with me. The full withdrawal had been clean. Too clean. So I dug deeper into archived statements. And that's when I noticed something smaller. 3 months earlier, a modest transaction labeled consulting services, then another. Different name. Same routing number. I leaned back in my chair. This hadn't started with one transfer. It had started slowly. And I hadn't seen it. Yet. I clicked into the business registration linked to the routing number. The company name was almost Diana's. One letter different. Registered 6 months ago. My house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen. I opened a new folder on my desktop, and I began saving everything. I didn't confront her again right away. Instead, I made copies. Every statement, every invoice, every small transfer that had slipped under my attention months earlier. I saved them to a secure drive, then backed them up to a cloud account Diana had never had access to. I labeled the folder simply, Emma, Audit. The next morning, I called an old colleague of mine, someone I had worked with years ago when I handled compliance reviews for a regional nonprofit. Her name was Marin. She now worked in financial investigations. "I have something I'd like a second set of eyes on," I told her. She didn't ask questions. She just gave me an address and said, "Bring what you have." Her office was in a modest building downtown. Fluorescent lights, neutral carpet, nothing polished or dramatic. We sat across from each other at a simple desk while I handed her the USB drive and the printed index. She reviewed the files quietly. After about 15 minutes, she tapped one page with her pen. "She layered it," Marin said. "How so?" "These smaller transactions," she pointed. "They're structured, below typical alert thresholds. Then the full transfer once she confirmed access was stable." I felt something settle into clarity. "This shell company," Marin continued, "it's thin. One-member LLC, recently formed. It's not sophisticated." "She didn't think I'd look," I said. Marin nodded slightly. "Most people don't." She outlined the next steps calmly. Step 1. Formalize the fraud claim with documented evidence of layered transactions. Step 2. Notify the bank's internal compliance division of potential structured siphoning. Step 3. File a civil demand letter for restitution before litigation becomes necessary. No raised voices, no threats, just sequence. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt since this began. Not anger, structure. That evening, Diana called again. This time her voice was quieter. "You've made your point," she said. "I'm not making points," I replied. "I'm correcting a record. You're escalating this unnecessarily. There were transactions 3 months ago. I said evenly. Design services, consultation fees, same routing number. Silence. You don't understand business, she finally replied. I understand patterns. Another silence. I let it stretch. Then I said, there will be a formal demand letter. I suggest you review your options. You wouldn't take this to court, she said. It wasn't a question. I prefer resolution. And I meant it. I ended the call. 2 days later, the bank notified me that the fraud review had expanded to include prior linked transfers. Diana's primary account remained frozen. Her LLC account was under examination. Emma sat beside me at the kitchen table when the email came through. She read it quietly. Step 2 complete, she said. I smiled faintly. Almost. The demand letter was delivered the following Monday. Certified mail, return receipt requested. It outlined the unauthorized access, the structured transfers, the total amount owed, including associated penalties and legal costs, if unresolved within 14 days. It was not emotional. It was precise. That evening, Diana didn't call. Instead, she showed up. Not at my house. At my husband's office. He called me from the parking lot. She's here, he said quietly. She's asking to speak privately. Don't, I replied. She says you're misunderstanding. I'm not. There was a pause. She looks different, he added. I closed my eyes briefly. Just come home, I said. When she finally did come to my house the next day, she arrived without champagne, without polish, just a coat pulled tight around her. I opened the door but did not invite her inside. You've embarrassed me, she said softly. I filed documentation. You froze everything. The bank did. She looked tired, not defeated, just strained. I was going to return it, she said. On what timeline? She didn't answer. Behind me, I could hear Emma moving in the kitchen, the soft clink of a mug being set down. I won't debate this, I said. The restitution deadline stands. You're choosing paperwork over family? I'm choosing accountability. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then she didn't. She left without another word. I closed the door gently. Then I waited. Because I knew the next move wouldn't be emotional. It would be financial. And those are easier to predict. 4 days passed without a word. No calls, no messages, no sudden visits. Silence can mean many things. In this case, it meant she was calculating. On the 5th morning, I received notification from the bank's compliance division requesting an in-person review. The email was formal, direct. It included references to structured withdrawals and potential misuse of inherited joint credentials. I printed it. Then I made tea. Emma came downstairs while the kettle was still steaming. Update? She asked. Yes. She nodded once and sat down across from me. She didn't press. She understood that waiting is part of process. I drove to the bank that afternoon. The compliance officer was different from the branch manager, less conversational, more precise. He reviewed the layered transactions and the timeline of access. Based on what we see, he said, this pattern indicates intentional structuring. That escalates classification from unauthorized access to potential fraud. He slid a document toward me. A formal affidavit to affirm that the access had not been granted permission after my father's passing. I signed it calmly. Step 1 had been proof of access. Step 2 was institutional acknowledgement. Step 3 would be recovery. No raised voices, no confrontation, just sequence. 2 days later, Diana called again. This time she did not open with anger. What are you asking for? She said quietly. Full restitution, I replied, within the stated timeline. And if I don't? It proceeds to civil filing. She exhaled slowly. You're prepared to testify against your own sister? I'm prepared to state facts. Silence again. You've changed, she said. No, I answered. I've clarified. She ended the call without another word. Later that evening, Emma sat on the floor of the living room reviewing something on her tablet. "What are you looking at?" I asked. "Property listings," she said. "For what?" She turned the screen toward me. "Diana's penthouse. Recently listed. No announcement, no social media post. Just a quiet listing with updated price history." I studied the timeline. The listing date matched the week her accounts were frozen. Emma looked at me carefully. "Liquidity pressure," she said. I nodded. When financial structures collapse, assets shift. This was not dramatic. It was mathematical. 3 days before the restitution deadline, a partial payment arrived. Wire transfer. Significant, but not complete. Attached was a short email. "This is good faith." I did not respond immediately. Instead, I forwarded the confirmation to our attorney and to Marin. Then I waited. That evening, I wrote down 3 simple rules on a sheet of paper. No informal agreements, no verbal reassurances, only documented resolution. I taped it inside my desk drawer, not as a reminder of her, as a reminder of myself. On the 14th day, the remaining balance was transferred. Full amount, plus documented fees. The bank sent confirmation that the fraud review would remain on record and that the LLC account was being referred to regulatory oversight. Consequences were no longer hypothetical. They were administrative. But there was one more matter to settle. The visit to Emma's school. The attorney filed for a formal no-contact order based on the financial dispute and the unscheduled approach to a minor. The hearing date was set quickly. Not dramatic, just procedural. When I told Emma, she didn't react emotionally. "Boundaries," she said. "Yes." On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Diana arrived dressed carefully, as she always did, composed, controlled. We sat across the aisle from one another, no eye contact. When the judge reviewed the documentation, the room was quiet except for the shuffle of pages. Bank statements, affidavit, school incident report. No commentary, just record. Diana's attorney attempted to frame it as a misunderstanding between family members. The judge interrupted gently. Unauthorized financial access combined with unsanctioned contact with a minor establishes reasonable concern. No anger, no lecture, just a ruling. The no-contact order was granted. Diana's expression shifted slightly. Not outrage, recognition. Lines had been drawn. We left the courthouse in silence. Outside, the air was cool, clear. Emma slipped her hand into mine. "So that's done?" she asked. "Yes." Not because I had argued, not because I had demanded, because systems function when documentation supports them. That evening, I returned home and placed all related files into a storage box, not to forget, but to close. Then I sat at the kitchen table and waited for the next notification, because even after restitution, processes have echoes, and I wanted to see where they would land. The final confirmation came on a Wednesday morning, an official letter from the bank's compliance department. Neutral language, clear outcome. The fraud designation would remain attached to the internal record. The layered transactions tied to Diana's LLC had been referred to regulatory review. The joint access credentials were permanently revoked and flagged. There was no dramatic wording, just institutional acknowledgement that the pattern had been real. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it in the storage box with the other documents. Emma came downstairs while I was closing the lid. "Is that the last of it?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded once and poured herself a glass of water. We didn't hug. We didn't talk about lessons. It wasn't that kind of moment. It felt more like closing a file cabinet. A week later, I received notice that Diana's penthouse sale had finalized. The lien placed during the proceedings had been satisfied through escrow. The civil penalties had been deducted automatically. Systems had done what they are designed to do, not because I fought loudly, because I followed process. Diana sent one final message. It was short. I hope this ends here. I read it carefully. Then I replied, It does, as long as boundaries are respected. No emotion, no commentary, just clarity. She did not respond. Life returned to ordinary rhythms. Emma focused on school again. College brochures replaced legal documents on the dining table. Her laughter drifted through the house more easily. One evening, I found her at the kitchen counter adjusting the new account settings once more. Double-check everything, she said lightly. I smiled. Already did. She looked at me. I'm glad we didn't yell, she said. So am I. Yelling feels powerful in the moment. Documentation lasts longer. The final piece arrived unexpectedly. A formal letter from the state regulatory office notifying me that Diana's LLC registration had been voluntarily dissolved. No explanation, just confirmation. I folded the letter neatly and added it to the box. Then I carried the box to the hall closet and placed it on the top shelf. Not hidden, just stored. That night, after Emma went to bed, I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Warm water, the soft scent of dish soap, the low hum of the refrigerator. Everything felt balanced again. Not triumphant, not vindictive. Balanced. Money had been restored. Boundaries had been enforced. Records had been corrected. I dried my hands and turned off the light. Then I waited for the quiet to settle fully into the house. Because resolution, when it's real, feels steady. And steady is enough. A few months later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I was reorganizing the pantry. Nothing dramatic, just moving things from one shelf to another, checking expiration dates, wiping down jars, the small maintenance tasks that keep a house running smoothly. Emma was at the kitchen table, reviewing a scholarship application. The sound of her pen moving across paper felt calm. Ordinary. That's what I noticed most. Ordinary had returned. The college account sat untouched except for steady growth and the occasional contribution. Two-factor authentication active, alerts enabled, password manager updated, systems in place. Emma looked up at one point and said, You know what I realized? What? I don't think this was about money for her. I leaned against the counter, drying a jar lid. No? She thought we wouldn't question her. I nodded slowly. That was probably true. Sometimes people rely on history, on old dynamics, on the assumption that silence equals agreement. What they don't always expect is quiet correction. Later that evening, I made tea and sat by the window. The sky had turned soft gray. Streetlights flickered on one by one. I thought about the way everything had unfolded. There had been no shouting matches, no dramatic confrontations, no public scenes, just documents, affidavits, timelines, process. Diana had moved into a smaller apartment across town. I heard that through a mutual acquaintance. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Some consequences are financial. Others are relational. Not all debts can be repaid with a wire transfer. But I also understood something else. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply defined it, and that distinction matters. Emma came and sat beside me with her tea. I feel ready, she said quietly. For what? For whatever comes next. I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. A few weeks later, a friend from church pulled me aside after service. She looked uncomfortable, hesitant. My brother has access to my business accounts, she said, and something doesn't feel right. I didn't give her advice right away. I just listened. Because sometimes the first step isn't confrontation. It's documentation. It's clarity. It's quiet preparation. I've learned that now. If you're listening and something in your life feels slightly off, slightly misaligned, don't panic. Start with the facts. Check the records. Trust your instincts, but verify with evidence. You don't need to yell to correct something. You just need structure and patience. If this story resonated with you, I'd love for you to like and subscribe so you can be part of this calm, thoughtful community. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always enjoy seeing how far these conversations travel. 2 other stories that people often connect with will be appearing on your screen next. Take your time with them. And as always, stay steady.